there, welcome to my kitchen. Well, we're just back from a lovely vacation on Cape Breton Island in Nova Scotia, and I think we ate our weight in Cape Breton Oatcakes. If you've ever been on vacation in Cape Breton or you've read about this magical place in the Highlands, you've probably had an oatcake or two, but if you have never heard of these, you're in for a treat. They are spectacular, even though they're the simplest cookie you'll ever make. They're made of oats, as you might guess from the name, with sometimes an equal amount of flour, but this one I'm heavy on the oats and a little lighter on the flour. Brown sugar, some people use white sugar, some people use a mixture, some people use maple syrup. I'm using brown sugar today. And there's also a healthy amount of fat to make everything lovely and crispy. This recipe today I'm making plant-based. In the olden days, oatcakes would have been made with lard. Nowadays, people will use all butter, sometimes a mixture of butter and shortening, sometimes all shortening. I'm using half shortening and half plant-based butter. And there's also a little bit of salt and a little bit of baking soda. And if you stick around to the end, I'll show you how to make this lovely, healthy cookie or oatcake even more decadent with the addition of a few special ingredients. So let's get mixing. I'm using a stand mixer. You can certainly mix these by hand, but I'm just making things easy. I have 2 cups of rolled oats. These are old-fashioned oats. Some people use quick oats. You can do that. I'm trying to be a little healthier here, so I'm using just old-fashioned rolled oats. These are organic. And I have 1.5 cups of all-purpose white flour. Mix that in with the oatmeal. And I have 1/2 cup of brown sugar. And I have 1/2 cup of vegetable shortening and 1/2 cup of plant-based butter. And as long as you're using a full cup of fat, you can use whatever you happen to have on hand. If you want to do all butter, do that. If you want to do all shortening, do that. If you want to do lard, like the old-fashioned recipes called for, you can certainly do that. And this fat is at room temperature. This is such an easy recipe. You don't have to worry about anything being chilled or melted. You just dump it all in the bowl. And I have 1/2 teaspoon of salt. I also have 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. We're going to add that later, and I'll show you the method for adding the baking soda. It's a little different than what you normally would do with a cookie recipe. So we'll just get our mixer going. Start off slow so things don't go all over the place. And things will start to come together, and some things will stick to the sides of the bowl, so just give that a scrape. It's coming together nicely now. I'm just going to give that another good scrape to make sure there's no unincorporated fat sticking to the paddle. Scrape down your bowl. One more mix. When you hear your mixer start to feel like it's working extra hard, that's the sign to stop it. And I just want to show you, my hands are clean, I just want to show you the consistency of this. So it's a nice, very sticky but firm dough. And now we're going to add the 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, but we're going to mix that with some hot water. So I've had my kettle, I boiled that a little earlier. The water is still nice and hot. You want 1/4 cup of hot water. It doesn't have to be boiling, but it should be hot. And put in your 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda. Just give that a little stir. Make sure your baking soda is well dissolved in the hot water, and then sprinkle that over your oatcake dough. Just sprinkle it all over. And then we're going to mix again. So now it's become even wetter and stickier. Give it another little mix. And that's it for mixing up the dough. So next we're going to clear off our work table, and I'll show you how we roll this out. I've cleaned off my work table, and I've preheated my oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. And now we're going to roll out our oatcake dough. The most important thing is to use lots and lots of flour for rolling it out, because it's a very sticky dough. Your hands should be well floured. And just tip this out onto your board. And you can see it's quite a wet, sticky dough. Flour your hands and just sort of shape that into a little disc. Now, one thing I'm going to do, I'm going to make something a little extra special with half of this batch. So I'm just going to flour my bench scraper. Oh, there's my oven going off. And I'm going to divide this in half. So I'm just going to set that to one side, back in the bowl here, and we'll get back to you. Redistribute your flour. Make that into a nice little, see if you can make it a little bit square. We're going to be cutting these into squares. Get lots and lots of flour on the top of your oatcake dough. Lots and lots of flour on your rolling pin. And just start gently rolling this. Don't use too much pressure. You won't need to use too much pressure because it's such a soft dough. I like my oatcakes on the thin side, so they're nice and crispy. Some people like them about 1/4 of an inch thick. Whatever your preference. Once you make these a few times, just experiment with the width that you're rolling them out to, and you will find what your family prefers. So a little bit more flour. And just feel with your hand if there are any high spots. That feels pretty good. Just gonna give that another little roll. So I'm going to use my bench scraper to square off these edges. Square that off. Shake off any excess flour. Now you can either use your bench scraper to cut these, but I'm going to use a long knife. I think that will be a little more precise. So just pick up a little flour and dust that along your knife. And let's see here. I think I'm going to do one cut right down the middle and then cut each of that into another strip. So try and get it as straight as you can. And if your knife seems like it's sticking a little bit, more flour. And then go this way. You can also cut these out with a cookie cutter, but I like just making a rectangle and cutting them into squares. I have some pans, and I ran out of parchment paper and forgot to buy more. So usually I would line my pans with parchment paper, but you know what? Our grandmothers never had parchment paper, so I'm going to see how it goes. If you have parchment paper, you might want to use that. So use a very thin spatula or a bench scraper like I have here, and just place them on your pan. These are not going to spread very much. That one's a little oddly shaped, so I'm just going to put that in that pile. I'm going to bake these for about 8 to 10 minutes until they're nice and crispy. So now we'll prepare our second half of dough that we set aside. And I'll just gather together those crumbs that we cut off from the other side. Not crumbs, just excess pieces of dough. Make sure you've still got lots of flour on your board. We'll get this out of the bowl. Just sort of bring that together a little bit. And remember when I said we're going to do something extra special with the second half of dough? Well, little add-ins are nice in oatcakes. You can add chopped nuts, you can add raisins, you can add chopped chocolate, which is really nice. I have 1/3 cup of score bits, and this is really not traditional. This is a new twist on oatcakes, but I love score bits. So just sprinkle your score bits over the top and press into the dough. And the dough is very soft, so it's going to accept this very easily. Don't let any escape because they're yummy. Use your bench scraper to fold that over. Just work that in a little bit. And this is sticky dough, so get some flour on your hands. And just make sure all those little score bits are well incorporated all throughout the dough. And if you're doing add-ins such as chopped chocolate or mini chocolate chips, the same principle applies. So make sure you're using your bench scraper to just scrape any of that dough off the work surface. Keep lots of flour there so it doesn't stick when you're rolling things out. Square that up a little bit, press it down, put some flour on your dough, put some flour on your pin, and roll this out. It's smelling really good in here. Those oatcakes are halfway through their baking, and I can't wait to show you what they look like. So roll these out maybe to between 1/8 of an inch and 1/4 of an inch. And again, as I said earlier, some people like thinner oatcakes, some people like thicker oatcakes. It's all down to personal preference. That feels like it's a very nice thickness. So again, square these off. And set that to one side. We'll re-roll that later. Use your bench scraper to get things nice and square, as square as you can. I think I will get 4 rows out of this. I thought I was only going to get 3, but... So while I've been cutting these out, my timer went on my first batch of oatcakes. These are the plain oatcakes, so let's just see what they look like. Okay, so those look pretty good. They're slightly golden around the edges, but they're still a very nice pale color, and I think we're going to call that done. So we'll let those cool off, and it's good to have multiple cookie sheets for this recipe. While those oatcakes are cooling on that pan, I've got another little one here. So finish cutting your oatcakes with the score bits into little squares or rectangles. And get some flour on your bench scraper. I've got a second bench scraper here. I think it's easier if you have 2 thin, maybe spatulas or bench scrapers. That's sort of an odd shape, so I'm going to put that in the re-roll pile. Pick these up and use this to help me transfer those to my baking sheet. You could use a very thin spatula for this too. There's 1 tray of the score oatcakes. I'm just going to set that to one side while I re-roll this little patch here. And these keep for a long time in a nice cookie tin. Not that you'll have them hanging around for that long. I'll slide this on the pan. Into the oven for round 2, starting at 8 minutes at 400 degrees. So I've got a nice little assembly line of oatcakes baking in the oven. The first ones, the plain ones, were finished in about 8 minutes. And oh look, they come right off the pan. I didn't need to use parchment paper at all. Those spread together a little bit, but see how nicely they just snap apart? And they're nice and crispy, golden on the bottom. And we're just waiting for the batch with the score bits to bake. They are taking a little bit longer, I think because of the extra sugar content. And also I made them slightly bigger. So there's our plain Cape Breton oatcakes. Look at the beautiful golden bottoms, and they're nice and crispy. Our oatcakes with the score bits have just finished their timer, so let's see how they're doing. And they're ever so slightly puffed, but they will settle down. So I'm just going to put them on this cooling rack and let them cool off and crisp up, and then I'll take them off this pan to cool completely on the cooling rack. These look fantastic. The pan is still a little bit hot, but I think we can attempt to remove these. Oh yeah, look, they slide right off. No parchment paper required. Look at the gorgeous golden bottom. You can see the score bits. So nice. So now we can get these off the pan and let them cool completely on the racks. Because of the score bits, you might find some are sticking a little bit, but that's pretty good. I just try and help them along a little bit with this bench scraper. If you have a very thin spatula, I would use that. Just get up underneath them. If any of them are sort of grown together in the oven, just use your bench scraper to tease them apart. I got a little greedy with my score bit oatcakes. They're twice the size as the regular oatcakes, but you know what? I don't think anyone's going to mind. I certainly won't mind. You know, as they cool, they really firm up. When they're just out of the oven, they're still a little fragile, so just be careful with them so that they don't break apart. But trying to make room. I might have to make room by taste testing one. What do you think? Let's give it a snap. Yeah, it's got a beautiful, beautiful crumb. And let's see, can you hear that? Yeah, a nice snap. Gorgeous. They melt in your mouth. They're buttery and crispy and sweet, but not overly so. And I'm dying to have a cup of tea right now so I can enjoy this to the fullest. How about you, cameraman? Would you like to have one? So that was the plain oatcake. And now let's try one of the score oatcakes. Break that in half. These ones are a little softer. I think the sugar content makes them, the extra sugar content makes them a little softer. And again, they haven't fully cooled. These have cooled completely, so they're nice and crispy, crunchy, but these are still slightly warm from just being taken out of the oven. Let's see what these taste like. Yeah, delicious. The score is very subtle. It just gives it that little hint of caramel. Cameraman, you want to try a score oatcake? Okay, so for the next step, we're going to decorate some of these, not all of them. Some of them I'll just keep in their pure, healthy oatcake state. but I have some 72% dark chocolate. I'm going to melt this in a double boiler on top of the stove, and then we'll just do a little decorating. So I have this chocolate in a metal bowl on top of a pot of simmering water, and it shouldn't take long at all. Okay, and we're there. So that took about 1.5 minutes to fully melt the chocolate. So I have my gorgeous, gorgeous melted chocolate, and I'm not going to dip all of these because I think it's nice to leave some oatcakes just in their pure, unadulterated state, but I am going to take some of them and just dip it in the chocolate and put it on the rack to firm up. Try another one. There. And if your kitchen is very, very warm, that is going to take a little while to firm up. So you can dip as many of your cookies as you like. I'm going to leave most of my regular plain oatcakes just plain. These are score oatcakes, so I'm going to do a drizzle. I love drizzling anything on desserts. I think it makes it look so beautiful. So you don't need much chocolate, just a little thin drizzle. Here, I think that is it for the chocolate. So, aren't these gorgeous? So I'm just going to let that chocolate set up, and then I'll put these in a cookie tin. I hope you enjoyed this recipe. Thanks very much for watching. Bye for now.